I watched through my security camera as three armed men in tactical gear stepped through my front gate without permission. Behind them stood Karen, pointing at my house like she owned it. My two German shepherds, Rex and Nova, had been quietly resting on my porch just moments before. Now they were on their feet, ears forward, muscles tense. The lead enforcer barked orders at me through my front door. "Sir, you need to surrender those animals immediately. We have authority from the HOA to remove them from the premises." I felt my jaw clench as 20 years of military training kicked in. These people had no idea what they had just walked into. My dogs were not pets. They were retired military working dogs, and I was not some helpless suburban homeowner who would roll over for fake authority. As I reached for my phone to call real law enforcement, I realized something that would change everything. Karen had just made the biggest mistake of her life. My name is Michael, and after 22 years serving my country, I thought I had earned some peace and quiet. I bought a modest 3-bedroom house in Willowbrook Estates, a suburban neighborhood that promised community and tranquility. The house came with a large backyard, perfect for my two companions who had served alongside me in Afghanistan. Rex and Nova were not just my dogs. They were decorated military working dogs who had saved countless lives overseas. Rex specialized in explosive detection, while Nova was trained in protection and crowd control. After their military service ended, I adopted them both. They deserved a comfortable retirement, just like any other veteran. I spent my first month in Willowbrook making sure my property was perfect. I installed proper fencing that met all local codes. I built a climate-controlled kennel with plenty of space for the dogs to exercise. I even planted flower beds along the front walkway to make the neighbors happy. Everything was by the book, legal and respectful. The neighborhood seemed ideal at first. My next-door neighbor, Tom, was a retired firefighter who immediately connected with my military background. Across the street lived the Johnsons, a young couple who waved every morning as they left for work. Most people appreciated having a veteran in the neighborhood, especially one who kept his property immaculate. But then I met Karen. Karen lived 4 houses down from me, but she acted like she owned the entire street. She introduced herself as the community liaison for the HOA, though I later learned this was a title she had given herself. Karen was in her 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and an attitude that could cut glass. Our first interaction happened during my second week in the neighborhood. I was training Rex and Nova in my backyard, running them through basic obedience drills. Both dogs performed flawlessly, sitting, staying, and heeling on command without a single bark or whine. Karen appeared at my fence line like she had materialized from thin air. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Those animals are quite large. Are you sure they are safe to have in a residential area?" I walked over to the fence, keeping my tone friendly and professional. "Ma'am, these are retired military working dogs. They have been trained to the highest standards and have never shown any aggression towards civilians." Karen crossed her arms and tilted her head. "Well, I am not comfortable with such intimidating animals so close to where children play. The HOA has very strict rules about pets that could be considered dangerous." I pulled out my phone and showed her the documentation. Both dogs are fully licensed, vaccinated, and registered with the county. They meet all local requirements for pet ownership. Karen barely glanced at the papers before shaking her head. "We will see about that. I plan to look into this matter further." As she walked away, I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. I had dealt with difficult people before, but something about Karen's tone told me this was just the beginning. Karen wasted no time launching her campaign against me and my dogs. 3 days after our fence-line conversation, I received my first official complaint from the HOA board. The letter, printed on expensive letterhead, accused me of violating noise ordinances due to excessive barking and disturbances. I read the complaint twice, wondering if they had sent it to the wrong address. Rex and Nova barely barked at all. They were trained to be silent unless specifically commanded to alert. I had security cameras that recorded audio, so I pulled the footage from the past week. The longest barking episode I could find lasted exactly 4 seconds when a delivery truck backfired in the street. I wrote a detailed response to the HOA board, including timestamps from my security footage and witness statements from Tom and the Johnsons. I explained the dogs' military training and provided documentation of their behavioral certifications. I thought logic and evidence would end this nonsense quickly. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I received complaint number 2. This time, Karen claimed my dogs were creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation in the neighborhood. She had somehow convinced the HOA that large dogs, regardless of their behavior, constituted a public safety risk. I decided to research the HOA bylaws myself. I spent an entire weekend reading through 57 pages of community guidelines and regulations. Nowhere in the documents could I find any restrictions on dog breeds, sizes, or military service animals. The only pet-related rules dealt with waste cleanup and leash requirements, both of which I followed religiously. Armed with this information, I attended the next HOA board meeting. The meeting was held in the community center, a bland conference room that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. 5 board members sat at a folding table, looking uncomfortable as Karen paced behind them like a general commanding troops. When my turn came to speak, I presented my case calmly and professionally. I showed the bylaws, the security footage, and the certification documents. I explained that my dogs were heroes who had served their country and deserved respect, not harassment. The board members shifted in their seats and exchanged glances. Board President Jim Morrison, a soft-spoken accountant, cleared his throat. "Mr. Michael, your documentation appears to be in order. We do not see any violations of our community guidelines." I felt a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. Karen slammed her hand on the table. "This is unacceptable. Those animals are a threat to our community, and I will not stand for it. If this board will not take action, then I will find people who will." The room fell silent. Even the board members looked shocked by her outburst. Jim Morrison's voice was barely above a whisper. "Karen, please, let us handle this through proper channels." Karen gathered her papers and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned back to face me directly. "You have no idea who you are dealing with," she said, her eyes burning with rage. "I have connections in this community, professional connections. If the HOA will not remove those animals, then I will bring in people who have the authority to do it properly." As she stormed out, the board members sat in stunned silence. I thanked them for their time and headed home, but Karen's threat echoed in my mind. Something about the way she said professional connections made my military instincts kick into high gear. That night, I made a decision that would prove crucial in the days ahead. I started treating this situation like a potential security threat. If Karen wanted to escalate beyond neighborhood politics, then I needed to be prepared for whatever she might bring to my door. My military training taught me that knowledge is power, especially when facing an unpredictable enemy. I decided to learn everything I could about Karen and her professional connections before she could make her next move. I started with public records. Karen's full name was Karen Elizabeth Hartwell, and she had lived in Willowbrook Estates for 8 years. Property records showed she had purchased her house during a messy divorce that left her with significant financial obligations. Court documents revealed a pattern of disputes with contractors, neighbors, and even her own family members. The deeper I dug, the more concerning the picture became. Karen had filed complaints against 6 different neighbors over the years. She had sued a landscaping company for emotional distress caused by leaf blower noise. She had tried to have a family evicted because their teenage son played basketball in their driveway. Most disturbing of all, she had somehow gotten herself appointed to multiple neighborhood committees despite having no real authority or qualifications. But the real revelation came when I discovered her connection to Apex Security Solutions, a private security company that specialized in HOA enforcement and property management. Their website was professional-looking, but something felt off about their services. They offered immediate response for problem residents and difficult situations requiring professional intervention. I called a friend from my military days who now worked in private security consulting. When I described Apex Security Solutions, his response chilled me to the bone. "Michael, those guys are bad news. They have been in trouble with the state licensing board multiple times. They basically intimidate people on behalf of HOAs and property management companies. Half their employees are wannabe cops who could not pass a real police academy." While I was gathering intelligence on Karen, she was apparently conducting surveillance on me. My security cameras caught her walking past my house at odd hours, always carrying a notebook and sometimes a camera. She would stop at my fence line and take pictures of my dogs, my property, and even my daily routines. The most disturbing incident happened on a Tuesday morning. I was inside making coffee when my motion sensors triggered. I pulled up the camera feed to see Karen standing in my backyard, just inside my gate, taking photos of Rex and Nova's kennel area. I stepped outside immediately. "Ma'am, you are on private property without permission. You need to leave now." Karen did not even look embarrassed. She held up her camera like it was a weapon. "I am documenting safety violations for the HOA board. These animals are clearly aggressive and dangerous." Rex and Nova were lying calmly in the shade, completely ignoring her presence. If anything, they looked bored by the whole situation. "There are no safety violations here," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You are trespassing. Please leave my property immediately." Karen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I am gathering evidence for the professionals I mentioned. They will need complete documentation before they take action." As she walked toward my gate, she paused and turned back. "You should know that I have already spoken with Apex Security Solutions. They specialize in situations exactly like this one. They have the authority to remove dangerous animals when HOAs and local authorities fail to act." After she left, I immediately called my lawyer and my contacts in local law enforcement. What I learned confirmed my worst fears. Apex Security Solutions had been operating in a legal gray area, claiming authority they did not actually possess. They had faced multiple complaints for harassment, intimidation, and exceeding their legal boundaries. But the most important information came from my police contact, Detective Sarah Chen. She had dealt with Apex before and knew their tactics. Michael, these people are basically hired bullies, she told me over the phone. They show up with intimidating uniforms and badges, claiming they have legal authority to enter property and seize assets. Most people get scared and comply, not knowing they have the right to refuse. What happens if I refuse? I asked. That depends on how far they are willing to push it. The smart ones back down when they meet real resistance. The stupid ones escalate until they cross the line into criminal territory. I thanked Detective Chen and hung up, my mind already racing through tactical scenarios. If Karen was planning to bring Apex security to my property, I needed to be prepared for every possible outcome. That evening, I spent hours reviewing Rex and Nova's training protocols. Both dogs were cross-trained in multiple specialties, but their primary skills were exactly what I might need. Rex's explosive detection training had taught him to identify threats and alert without aggression. Nova's protection training focused on containment and crowd control. As I watched my two companions resting peacefully in their kennel, I realized something important. Karen thought she was bringing professionals to intimidate an amateur. She had no idea that she was about to face 3 veterans who had survived real combat and were not afraid of fake authority. Thursday morning started like any other day. I was having my coffee on the back porch, watching Rex and Nova enjoy the morning sunshine. The dogs were relaxed, lying on their favorite spot near the flower beds I had planted for them. Everything felt peaceful and normal. That peace shattered at exactly 9:47 a.m. My security system chimed, indicating someone had entered my front gate. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone and felt my blood pressure spike. 3 men in dark tactical uniforms were walking up my front driveway. Behind them, Karen marched like she was leading a military parade. I had been expecting this moment for weeks, but seeing it actually happen still sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. I called Rex and Nova to my side with a quiet hand signal. Both dogs immediately moved into a ready position, alert but calm. The lead man was tall and broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and mirrored sunglasses that probably cost more than his training. His uniform had Apex security patches and a badge that looked official from a distance. The other 2 men flanked him like backup dancers, trying to look intimidating but mostly succeeding in looking inexperienced. They stopped at my front door and the leader pounded on it with his fist, using far more force than necessary. "Open up. This is Apex Security Solutions. We have authority from the Willowbrook Estates HOA to inspect this property and remove dangerous animals." I took a deep breath and opened the door, keeping Rex and Nova behind me. Both dogs were perfectly still, watching the intruders with professional interest. "Good morning, gentlemen. I am Michael Thompson, and this is my private property. What can I help you with today?" The leader stepped forward, clearly trying to invade my personal space. "Sir, we have reports of dangerous animals on these premises. We are here to conduct an immediate inspection and remove any animals that pose a threat to community safety." I smiled politely and shook my head. "I am sorry, but you do not have the authority to enter my property or remove my animals. These are licensed, registered pets on private property." Karen pushed past the security team, her face red with frustration. "Michael, stop being difficult. These men have the legal authority to resolve this situation once and for all." The leader nodded and pulled out an official-looking document. "Sir, this is a compliance order from the HOA. You are required to cooperate with our inspection or face immediate legal action." I glanced at the paper without taking it. Even from a distance, I could see it was poorly formatted and full of legal-sounding nonsense that meant nothing. These people were counting on intimidation and fake authority to get their way. "Gentlemen, I am going to explain this once," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. "You are private security contractors with no legal authority to enter my property, inspect my animals, or seize my possessions. If you attempt to enter my property without permission, you will be trespassing." The second security man, younger and clearly nervous, spoke up. "Sir, we are just doing our job. We do not want any trouble." But the leader was not backing down. He gestured to his team and took a step toward my door. "Sir, we are coming in whether you cooperate or not. Step aside and control those animals." That was the moment everything changed. I stepped back and let Rex and Nova move into position. Both dogs immediately flanked me, their military training taking over. They did not bark, growl, or show any signs of aggression. Instead, they positioned themselves strategically, blocking the entryway and creating a wall of controlled force. The security team stopped dead in their tracks. Suddenly, the leader's tough guy attitude evaporated as he found himself facing two 60-pound German shepherds who moved with precision and purpose. "Sir, control your animals," he said, but his voice had lost its commanding edge. "My animals are perfectly controlled," I replied. "They are trained to protect this property from unauthorized entry. If you attempt to trespass, they will respond accordingly." Karen screamed from behind the security team. "This is ridiculous. Those animals are threatening law enforcement officers." I turned my attention to her, keeping my voice steady. "Ma'am, these men are not law enforcement officers. They are private contractors with no legal authority, and my dogs are not threatening anyone. They are simply maintaining a defensive position on their own property." The leader tried to regain control of the situation. "Sir, we are going to call the real police if you do not comply immediately." "Please do," I said, pulling out my phone. "I have already called them myself. They should be here any minute." As if on cue, the sound of sirens began echoing through the neighborhood. The security team exchanged nervous glances as two police cruisers pulled up to my house. Karen's face went pale as she realized her carefully planned intimidation had become a legal nightmare. The leader of the security team was talking rapidly into his radio, probably trying to figure out how to explain this situation to his supervisor. Detective Sarah Chen stepped out of the first police car, and I felt a wave of relief. She had dealt with Apex Security before and knew exactly what was happening. "Gentlemen," she called out to the security team, "I need to see some identification and documentation of your authority to be on this property." The leader's confident demeanor crumbled completely as he realized he was about to face real law enforcement instead of an intimidated homeowner. Karen tried to disappear behind the security team, but it was too late. The confrontation she had orchestrated was about to become the biggest mistake of her life. Detective Chen approached the scene with the calm authority that comes from years of experience. She looked at the three Apex security men, then at Karen, then at me and my dogs. Rex and Nova remained in their defensive positions, alert but perfectly controlled. "Officers, thank goodness you are here," Karen started, but Detective Chen raised her hand. "Ma'am, please step back. I need to speak with these gentlemen first." She turned to the Apex team leader. "Sir, I need to see your identification and any documentation that gives you authority to be on this property." The leader fumbled for his wallet, his earlier confidence completely gone. "Detective, we are responding to a legitimate HOA complaint about dangerous animals. We have full authority to inspect and remove threats to community safety." Detective Chen examined his ID and the fake compliance order. "Mr. Rodriguez, this document has no legal standing. HOAs do not have the authority to authorize property searches or animal seizures. You are aware of this, correct?" Rodriguez's face flushed red. We were told by the client that this was a legitimate enforcement action." "The client being Ms. Hartwell here." Detective Chen gestured toward Karen, who was trying to blend into the background. "Yes, ma'am. She hired us to resolve a dangerous animal situation that the HOA could not handle through normal channels." Detective Chen nodded and turned to me. "Mr. Thompson, did you give these men permission to enter your property?" "Absolutely not," I replied. "I explicitly told them they were trespassing and asked them to leave. They refused and threatened to enter by force." The second police officer had been documenting everything with his body camera. He stepped forward and addressed the Apex team. "Gentlemen, you are currently trespassing on private property. The homeowner has asked you to leave, and you have no legal authority to remain here." Rodriguez made one last desperate attempt to maintain his authority. "Officers, those animals are clearly dangerous. Look at how they are positioned. They are preparing to attack." I almost laughed at the absurdity of his statement. Rex and Nova were demonstrating textbook defensive positioning. They had not moved aggressively, barked, or shown any signs of hostility. If anything, they looked bored with the whole situation. Detective Chen walked closer to examine my dogs. Rex and Nova remained perfectly still, tracking her movement with their eyes but showing no reaction to her presence. "Mr. Thompson, these are military working dogs, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Both are retired veterans with exemplary service records. Rex specialized in explosive detection, and Nova was trained in protection and crowd control." Detective Chen smiled slightly. "I can tell their discipline is impressive." She turned back to Rodriguez. "Sir, these animals are showing no signs of aggression whatsoever. They are simply maintaining a defensive position on their own property, which is completely legal." Karen finally stepped forward, her voice shrill with desperation. "Detective, you do not understand. These animals have been terrorizing our neighborhood for months. They bark constantly and threaten anyone who walks by." "Ma'am, do you have any evidence of this alleged terrorizing?" Detective Chen asked. Karen fumbled with her phone. "I have photos and videos of their threatening behavior." She showed Detective Chen several photos of Rex and Nova lying peacefully in their yard, playing with toys and eating from their bowls. The most threatening image was a video of Nova yawning. Detective Chen handed the phone back to Karen. "Ma'am, I see no evidence of threatening behavior in any of these photos or videos." The situation was rapidly deteriorating for the Apex team. Rodriguez was sweating profusely, and his two companions looked like they wanted to disappear. Karen was becoming increasingly frantic as her carefully constructed narrative fell apart. "Officers," I said calmly, "I have security footage from this morning showing these men ignoring my refusal to grant them entry and threatening to enter by force. I also have documentation of Ms. Hartwell trespassing on my property multiple times to conduct surveillance." Detective Chen's expression hardened. "Mr. Rodriguez, based on what I have observed and the homeowner's statements, I am placing you and your team under arrest for criminal trespass and attempted intimidation." Rodriguez's jaw dropped. Detective, you cannot be serious. We are licensed security professionals. You are licensed to provide security services within the boundaries of the law, Detective Chen replied. You have exceeded those boundaries today. As the handcuffs came out, Karen made one final desperate plea. Detective, this is all a misunderstanding. I was just trying to protect my neighborhood from dangerous animals. Detective Chen turned to Karen with a stern expression. Ms. Hartwell, you hired these men to conduct an illegal property search and seizure. You also appear to have provided false information about the threat level of these animals. We will be discussing your role in this incident very thoroughly. As the Apex security team was loaded into police cars, Karen stood on my front lawn looking stunned. The neighborhood had gathered to watch the spectacle, and I could see several neighbors filming with their phones. Rex and Nova remained in their positions until I gave them the all-clear signal. Only then did they relax, returning to their normal, peaceful demeanor. Several neighbors who had been watching approached to congratulate me and apologize for Karen's behavior. Detective Chen handed me her card before leaving. Mr. Thompson, you handled this situation perfectly. Your dogs showed remarkable discipline under pressure. You should be proud of them. As the police cars drove away with the Apex team in custody, I looked down at Rex and Nova. They had performed exactly as their training dictated, using the minimum force necessary to protect their territory while maintaining complete control. Karen walked slowly back to her house, her carefully planned intimidation campaign now a criminal matter that would follow her for years to come. The real consequences were just beginning. The legal aftermath of Karen's failed intimidation campaign unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of justice. Within 48 hours of the arrests, I received calls from 3 different lawyers offering to represent me in what they described as a slam-dunk civil case. I chose Rebecca Martinez, a former military lawyer who specialized in harassment and intimidation cases. During our first meeting, she reviewed the evidence I had collected and smiled broadly. Michael, this is one of the most well-documented cases of harassment and illegal intimidation I have ever seen. You have security footage, police reports, witness statements, and a clear pattern of escalating behavior. Karen and Apex Security are in serious legal trouble. The criminal charges against the Apex security team were filed within a week. Rodriguez faced charges of criminal trespass, intimidation, and impersonating a law enforcement officer. His 2 companions were charged with trespass and conspiracy. Karen faced charges of filing false reports, hearing unlicensed security services, and conspiracy to commit trespass. But the criminal charges were just the beginning. Rebecca filed a comprehensive civil lawsuit against Karen, Apex Security Solutions, and the HOA board for harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy, and defamation. The damages we sought included compensation for legal fees, security system upgrades, and punitive damages to prevent similar incidents. The HOA board called an emergency meeting within days of the lawsuit being filed. Jim Morrison, the board president, called me personally to discuss the situation. Michael, we want you to know that the board never authorized Karen's actions. We had no idea she was planning to bring private security onto your property. I appreciated his honesty, but I also needed to protect myself legally. Jim, I understand that the board may not have directly authorized this, but Karen was acting as your community liaison. Her actions created liability for the entire organization. The emergency HOA meeting was standing room only. Neighbors who had been silent during Karen's campaign suddenly found their voices. Tom, my firefighter neighbor, stood up and addressed the board directly. I have watched Karen harass Michael for months over dogs that have never caused any problems. She has trespassed on his property, filed false complaints, and now brought armed men to intimidate a military veteran. This behavior is unacceptable and embarrassing to our community. Other neighbors shared similar stories. The Johnsons described how Karen had tried to get them cited for parking violations that did not exist. An elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson tearfully recounted how Karen had reported her for having unauthorized garden decorations that violated no actual rules. The pattern became clear to everyone in the room. Karen had been using her self-appointed position to terrorize neighbors for years, and the HOA board had been too intimidated to stop her. During the meeting, Karen herself remained silent, sitting in the back row with her arms crossed. When Jim Morrison asked if she had anything to say in her defense, she simply shook her head. The board voted unanimously to remove Karen from all HOA positions and to revoke her access to community facilities. They also voted to implement new policies requiring board approval for any enforcement actions and prohibiting the use of private security companies. Meanwhile, Apex Security Solutions was facing its own legal crisis. The state licensing board launched an investigation into their practices, and several other victims came forward with similar stories of intimidation and illegal enforcement actions. The company's insurance carrier refused to cover the lawsuit, citing policy exclusions for criminal activity. Within 2 months, Apex Security Solutions filed for bankruptcy, leaving Rodriguez and his team to face the legal consequences on their own. The media attention was intense, but largely positive. Local news stations covered the story as an example of HOA overreach and the importance of standing up to bullies. Social media picked up the story, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences with problem neighbors and abusive HOAs. I received messages from veterans across the country who had faced similar harassment. Many thanked me for standing up not just for myself, but for all veterans who had earned the right to live peacefully with their service animals. The most satisfying moment came when Detective Chen called to update me on the criminal case. Michael, Rodriguez and his team have accepted plea deals that include jail time, fines, and permanent loss of their security licenses. They will never work in private security again. Karen's case was more complicated, but the outcome was equally satisfying. Her lawyer negotiated a plea deal that required her to pay restitution, perform community service, and attend anger management counseling. She also received a restraining order that prohibited her from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property. The civil settlement was reached 6 months after the initial incident. The exact terms were confidential, but I can say that it covered all my legal expenses, compensated me for the harassment I had endured, and included enough punitive damages to ensure that Karen would think twice before targeting another neighbor. The neighborhood began to heal once Karen's toxic influence was removed. Property values actually increased as word spread that Willowbrook Estates had successfully dealt with its problem resident. New families moved in, and the community became the peaceful, friendly place it was supposed to be. Rex and Nova became neighborhood celebrities, with children asking their parents if they could meet the hero dogs. Both dogs enjoyed the attention, and proved once again that proper training and socialization create ambassadors, not threats. But the most important outcome was the precedent we had set. Other homeowners facing similar harassment now had a roadmap for fighting back against bullies who hide behind fake authority and intimidation tactics. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, I stood in my backyard watching Rex and Nova play fetch with the neighbor kids. The transformation in our community was remarkable, but the personal growth I had experienced was even more meaningful. The legal victories had been complete and satisfying. Corinne's settlement payment allowed me to upgrade my security system and make improvements to my property that benefited not just me, but the entire neighborhood. I installed better lighting along our shared walkways and planted trees that provided shade for everyone's morning walks. Corinne herself had become a cautionary tale throughout the region. Word of her harassment campaign and its consequences spread through social media and local news coverage. Real estate agents began using our neighborhood as an example of how communities could successfully deal with problem residents through proper legal channels. She had quietly moved away 3 months after the settlement, selling her house at a significant loss. The new family who moved in, the Patels, were everything Corinne was not. They were friendly, respectful, and genuinely interested in being good neighbors. Rex and Nova had received recognition from the local Veterans Administration for their service and their exemplary behavior during the incident. The VA used their story in a presentation about the value of service animals and the importance of supporting veterans in their transition to civilian life. The HOA board had implemented sweeping reforms that protected all residents from future harassment. They established clear procedures for filing complaints, required evidence to support any enforcement actions, and created an appeals process for residents who felt they were being unfairly targeted. Jim Morrison had become a genuine leader in the community, using the lessons learned from the Corinne incident to build a more inclusive and respectful neighborhood culture. He often called me for advice when dealing with minor disputes, and I was happy to help him resolve conflicts before they escalated. The media attention had brought unexpected opportunities. I was invited to speak at community forums about dealing with harassment and the rights of homeowners. Veterans groups asked me to share my story as an example of how military training could be applied to civilian challenges. Most importantly, other homeowners who were facing similar harassment reached out for advice and support. I helped several families document their cases properly and connected them with lawyers who specialized in HOA disputes. Many of these cases were resolved quickly once the bullies realized they were facing organized, prepared resistance. Rex and Nova had settled into their roles as neighborhood ambassadors. Children would ask their parents to walk past our house just to see the famous dogs who had protected their owner from the bad people. Both dogs seemed to understand their celebrity status and always performed for their young audience. The incident had taught me valuable lessons about the importance of preparation, documentation, and standing up to bullies. But it had also shown me the power of community support when people finally find the courage to speak up against injustice. Tom, my firefighter neighbor, summed it up best during a backyard barbecue we hosted for the whole neighborhood. "Michael, what you did was not just about protecting your property or your dogs. You showed all of us that we do not have to accept being pushed around by people who think they can intimidate us into submission." As I watched my neighbors enjoying each other's company, sharing stories and building genuine friendships, I realized that Karen had actually done us a favor. Her harassment campaign had forced our community to confront its problems and implement real solutions. The peace and quiet I had sought when I moved to Willowbrook Estates had been disrupted by conflict, but the resolution of that conflict had created something better than mere tranquility. We had built a community based on mutual respect, proper procedures, and the understanding that everyone deserves to feel safe in their own home. Rex and Nova had earned their peaceful retirement through their service to our country. Now they were enjoying the fruits of another successful mission, protecting their home and family from those who would abuse their authority. As the sun set over our neighborhood, I felt a deep satisfaction that comes from standing up for what is right and seeing justice prevail. Karen had thought she could intimidate a veteran and his service dogs, but she had learned a valuable lesson about the difference between real authority and manufactured power. The K-9 units had made her regret it, and our community was stronger because of it.